with just 3 days until the temporary ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran is set to expire, tensions remain high over the Strait of Hormuz. Last night, Iran's Revolutionary Guard said the strait will stay closed until the U.S. blockade is lifted. It comes after Iran reportedly fired on 2 vessels from India attempting to pass through the strait on Saturday. For now, there's no date set for a new meeting between U.S. and Iranian negotiators. But yesterday, Trump said talks were ongoing.
We have very good conversations going on. It's working out very well. They got a little cute, as they have been doing for 47 years. They wanted to close up the strait again, as they've been doing for years, and they can't blackmail us.
For its part, an Iranian official told the Associated Press that Iran is not ready for new talks, citing the U.S. refusal to abandon maximalist demands. Meanwhile, as the war with Iran enters its 8th week, the Wall Street Journal reports that the U.S. military is preparing in coming days to board Iranian-linked oil tankers and seize commercial ships in international waters. Joining us now is Jon Finer, former Principal Deputy National Security Advisor in the Biden administration. He's also the co-host of the Long Game podcast. John, thanks for joining us this morning. I have a question that I've sort of had in the back of my mind, and I feel like should have called an expert earlier to resolve this. But when the president is making these claims that the Iranian Navy, the Iranian military has been completely decimated and destroyed, and then you see reports that fleets, these Mosquito fleets in the waters, and these other Iranian National Guard forces are still taking action, completing missions, and obviously being effective to some extent. How do you differentiate those two things? And, I mean, based on the public reporting, how much capacity does Iran have to continue to wage this war? It seems like they've got much more manpower here than the president and the rest of the administration originally anticipated.
It's a really good question, and I think there's 2 things going on here. One is that the Iranians have learned something very important and very damaging to the United States and to the rest of the world, which is that they can accomplish quite a lot strategically, militarily, with not that much military capability. So let's just take at face value the president's claim that the Iranian military has been badly damaged by this war, which I think they have, including their Navy. Iran has shown that with a few drones a day fired into the Strait of Hormuz, and maybe with a few small naval vessels, not giant naval ships with gray hulls the way you think of the U.S. Navy, but little fast boats, almost like the boats that drug dealers use in the Caribbean, kind of buzzing around bigger ships. They can bring significant amounts of the global economy, commercial traffic that flows through this narrow waterway, to a halt, and it doesn't take all that much. The second thing going on, unfortunately, is that the credibility of the statements coming out of this administration, out of the White House, on accomplishments in the war, on how the talks are proceeding, cannot be taken at face value. The president was announcing on Friday that, peace in our time had arrived and that we were on the cusp of a deal, and within hours that had clearly been revealed not to be true.
One of the things that's behind the credibility crisis might be what our friends at the Wall Street Journal, Josh Dawsey and Annie Linsky, wrote that came out last night. For those of you who are looking for inside the room conversations and stories, this is a really good one to look into. They write, he is veering between belligerent and conciliatory approaches and grappling behind the scenes with just how badly things could go wrong. At the same time, the president sometimes loses focus, spending time on the details of his plans for the White House ballroom or on midterm fundraisers and telling advisors he wants to shift to other topics. Jon Finer, the board approach that Trump seems to have when he talks about this, right? Even yesterday when he was doing a signing, reporters started asking and he was like out. He didn't want to talk about Iran. And when you look at the length of time that there has actually been negotiating, it pales in comparison to the JCPOA of the Obama administration. I had our team put together a kind of SOT mash of the length of negotiations coming from folks who were in these rooms to compare to the Trump administration. Let's play that.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not: a comprehensive long-term deal with Iran.
This moment has been a long time coming, and we have worked very hard to get here.
This was an extraordinary 27 days for me in Vienna. Much of my team was there for much longer than that. We have been at this for over 2 years.
At the very end, they basically moved to Vienna. When you look at how the Trump folks are approaching this, the length of time that they seem willing to give to hammering out a deal that has beleaguered administration after administration, what rings true to you?
Well, one thing that rings very obvious to me is that there was no chance of reaching a deal in 1 day of talks in Pakistan that Vice President Vance showed up for back more than now a week ago. And if they are serious about getting this resolved diplomatically, getting this resolved through an agreement, they're going to have to put in the time. They're going to have to bring experts into the conversation who actually understand these issues, who understand what is at stake when it comes to Iran's nuclear program, what they should be able to keep and what they should be able to give away, what we have to give on our side of the equation. Because after all, this is a negotiation, and it's quite clear, given what Iran has suffered on the battlefield, that they're not likely to make more concessions. They have survived, their regime has survived, and they're not likely to make more concessions unless the United States puts something on the table in terms of sanctions relief or some other incentives. These are complicated talks. And as you just pointed out, and as those clips showed, I was in Vienna with Secretary Kerry and Wendy Sherman, who you just showed talking about those talks. Secretary Kerry spent 19 consecutive days in Vienna to finish the very last stage of the Iran nuclear agreement, the longest any Secretary of State had ever been out of the country in any one country, I think, literally in the history of the United States. And that was just to finish the end stage. This takes time, it takes expertise, it takes working the details, and it's not at all clear that they have the desire, the bandwidth to put in the time necessary to get this done.